Hi, it's Pastor Andy. In the daily videos for this week and next week, I'm going to get into some of the debate that occurs in Romans chapter 7. And there's really some complexities in trying to understand certain areas of the Bible, and this is one of those areas. Now, my goal is not to create confusion, but I realize that that is likely to happen. So if you watch this video, I really encourage you to watch all 4 videos this week, Monday through Thursday, to get the complete overview. Because otherwise, I think if you only watch 1 or 2 of them, it'll leave you more confused. But I am treading lightly because I don't want to create confusion. But in this week, I want to share what should be considered one of the simplest words in the English language, and that is the single letter word, I. Now, we see this in Romans 7 through 12, which is this week's passage, but we're going to see it through verse 25, so it continues into next week. And honestly, the reason I'm covering this is not because the I is the central point of this passage. The point of this passage is the law of Moses, but how we interpret the I will impact how we interpret the rest of Romans chapter 7. So let me say that most of the time when you see the word I, the one-letter word I, in the Bible, it is used as we would regularly think of using the word I. It is the first-person singular pronoun. It is the word that I am using when I say I am recording a video right now. So, and we see this word used all throughout the Bible. We see it in the story of creation in Genesis 1:29, for instance, when God is giving the first set of instructions to mankind. He said, I, as he's talking to them. We see it in Genesis 2:18 when God says that I will make a helper for Adam. We see it in Genesis chapter 3 when Adam, now man is using the word I, is talking about the fact that why he is hiding from God after that initial sin. Adam then uses it. Back to God, we see it famously in Exodus chapter 3 where in talking to Moses and in helping Moses to have a way to explain who he was talking to the Israelites, God said, I am. And then right before right as God was giving the 10 Commandments in Exodus chapter 20, verse 2, he uses the I. God uses the I again. I am the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. We see other uses of I, like David when he repents in Psalm 51, that he says, I have sinned. I was born in iniquity. We see in Paul using the word I throughout. In fact, in Romans, the most the most recent example of Paul using that word is in Romans 6:19, where he says, I am speaking in human terms. We also, of course, see it in Jesus' words in Matthew 16:18, where he says, I will build my church. We see it at the end of Revelation, the next to the last verse in the Bible. Jesus says, I am coming soon. So literally from the first chapter of the Bible, Genesis 1:29, to the last chapter of the Bible, the next to the last verse of the Bible, we see the word I used in its traditional first-person singular pronoun use. Again, like me saying, I am recording this video. And Paul might be using it that way in Romans chapter 7. But he might not be either. And that's what makes his use of I so particularly interesting here and deserves for us to go in and look at it a little bit more closely. If Paul is using the word I in a typical fashion, then Romans 7 through 25 becomes very straightforward. However, as we'll see in next week's deep dive into verses 13 and 25, that I creates a few more challenge. But let's look at this week's text in verse 7 through 12. If I really means I, if in the traditional sense, in verse 7, Paul means that we would not have known sin, that I would not have known sin, that Andy would not have known sin. In Paul's words, I, Paul, would not have known sin without the law being made known. That is reasonable. That is understandable. Specifically, Paul used the law against coveting as his example, and in verse 9 he wrote that he was once alive, Paul was once alive apart from the law. That is, the law had no effect on him because he did not know it, but when sin came alive, he, meaning Paul, I, died. That's the problem. It's a reasonable and understandable perspective on the passage because, again, we're used to seeing the word I played out in that normal, traditional usage. And we could understand the word death here, just like we do in Genesis chapter 3, as is so often the case said, Adam and Eve didn't die as soon as they ate of the fruit. Well, no, not in one sense, but in another sense they did. They had separation from God. So we could say that indeed Paul had separation from God once he realized the law. Now, one of the strongest arguments for the traditional use of the I is verse 24, where Paul talks about the wretched man that I am. That is a passioned statement. There is a lot of emotion in that. And if it's not truly about himself, well, then it's melodramatic probably at best. So, but in Romans 5, here's the real challenge with the I being about Paul, with Paul referring to himself in the first person here. In Romans 5, Paul says that sin was in the world before the law was given. And specifically, again, in this passage, he's talking about the Mosaic law. He's not talking about random laws, although in Romans 5, he's talking about law in general. But here, he's talking about the Mosaic law. And in Romans 5, sin was in the world before the law was given. Sin happened when Adam and Eve took the fruit. Generation after generation later, hundreds if not thousands if not more years later, is when Moses was given the law by God. So, as a person, I, Paul, as he's saying, was not alive before the law was given. He was not alive before sin had entered the world. So, if this is true, then is it possible that Paul is not using the I in the traditional sense? Is he using it metaphorically? The answer is yes, it is possible. I'm not saying that's true, I'm just saying it is possible. And many people, conservative biblical scholars, believe that that is the case, that he is not using the I in a personal sense. So in the next couple of videos, I'm going to share a couple of the top options with this, and then on Thursday's video, I will share my own conclusion based upon what I think about the I and how it fits into Romans 7 overall. So again, this might have created some confusion. If you stop after Monday's video, I think there's going to be a loss. So please check out Tuesday and Wednesday at a minimum. Make your own decision, but I'll wrap all of this up on Thursday to try to alleviate any confusion that you might have.